Mic works this time. At 7:50 p.m., the Undergraduate Senate is called to order. Will the clerks please take the roll?
Haugen, Hendricks, Henson, Morinville, Nguyen Ram, Nguyen, Ophi, Parapelli, Pierce, Womble, Ellis, Gary, Kim, Stanton, Forbes, Guskowitz, Jones, Vernon, Wilson, Alexander, Brandon, Grimm, Mana, McDermott, Nanduri, Smith, Sodano, Flynn, Langley, Longo, Aurora, Erdow, Jessup, McClanahan, Palakuri, Schneider, Adams, Baruch, Jane, Leonard, Pollock.
Point of order, I don't believe Senator Dispute was called and rolled.
Seeing as we have a quorum, we will proceed with the rest of our agenda. At this time, is there a motion with regards to the minutes from the previous meeting?
Motion to adopt.
Hearing no objection, the minutes stand adopted. We will now move into the reports of the Office of the Senate, starting with my report. I will try and keep this brief. Update on the archiving project. Wilson Archives has not gotten back to me yet about like the paperwork that I've signed for them. It's because there's a couple other organizations which are part of student government that are also archiving, and they prefer to move everything all at once instead of in like separate batches. So that's been delayed slightly. Staff hiring. We have one staff position vacant. That is our journal clerk. If you know of anyone that would be interested in filling that position, please direct them to the application on the Heal Life page. The Senate website is, let's say, functionally updated. There's a few pages that like have placeholder information on them because they're like extra pages we added, but all of the like required information is on there, including our meeting schedule, minutes, legislation, and all committee records are also posted on the website. What else is going on? I don't think I have any other like business updates that are related to my position. Are there any questions? Seeing no questions, the Speaker Pro Tempore is not here. Does the Finance Committee Chair have a report?
Yes, I do. Okay. 2 weekends ago, we opened the applications for the subsequent and food insecurity cycle. For that, we received 11 applications for the food insecurity cycle and 47 applications for the subsequent cycle. We will be holding hearings for those 2 cycles this Thursday and next Tuesday, starting at 6:45 p.m. So Finance Committee Senators, you've all received the agenda to the meeting. Make sure to show up to that. That is all that I have.
Yes. I'm present. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. We will now move to the report from our Rules and Judiciary Committee Chair.
R&J met last week. We considered some legislation, which is now on the consent calendar, and there was a nominee who is not present, so they're on general orders. That's all.
If there are no questions, we'll proceed to our report from the Oversight and Advocacy Committee Chair.
I don't have too much to report right now. We did not get quorum at our meeting, so I'm looking forward to maybe changing up attendance a little bit. So we'll be getting some more people, continue to just discuss some issues, even if we weren't able to meet. So we'll be working on that continually.
If there are no questions, we'll proceed to our report from the Ethics Committee Chair.
Hey, y'all. We got a couple people who have received suspension and voting privileges since last meeting. Those include Senator Bennett, Senator Womble, Senator Sedano. Yeah. So if you've received these and don't believe that should be the case, please contact me. You can also submit a written plan to the Senate on how you will rectify your attendance issues if you wish to regain voting privileges. Aside from that, senators who are at 8 attendance points and thus at a warning include Senator Morinville, Senator Fay, Senator Parapali, Senator Manna, Senator Flynn, and Senator Jane. Again, if you believe these are possibly wrong, please email me. I'd rather know that now rather than later. Other than that, Ethics Committee met today. I think we got a new record for meeting length. It took about 45 seconds. We just had to confirm which seats were vacant for the fall elections. Other than that, I know some people have been slightly displeased about last meeting regarding especially my comments on ethics actions. And I urge you to please reach out if you think I'm doing my job in a way that could be improved. It's my responsibility to make choices regarding that. And I thought it was of the utmost important that we got the budget bill passed. We did not negatively impact a lot of students. So yeah, but I'm glad we got that passed. I'm glad people could work out the amendments they wanted. Anyone have any questions?
As a point of information, Senator Flynn resigned.
That would make sense. I actually have that written down.
If there are no other questions, we'll move to our report from the Joint Governance Council member at large.
Quorum was made, but there was it was only just reports. The graduate school is back in session and their new graduate students we met with the new graduate students for the JGC. That's about it, just reports.
If there are no questions, we'll move to reports from our members of the Commission on Campus Equality and Student Equity, if they have any.
We didn't meet.
If there are no questions, we'll move to our receipts of petitions and messages, beginning with our message from the student body president.
What's your preference?
Hello, everyone. My name is Taylor Smith, and I'm here as proxy today for President Everett. He apologizes for being unable to attend today, but his mom had a procedure done this morning, and he needed to be home with her this evening as she recovers. All is well, so no worries there, but he thanks you all for your understanding. In terms of updates, President Everett finished up his Board of Trustee meeting 2 weeks ago. Nothing too notable from these meetings, but there were presentations from UNC Police Chief Brian James about safety on campus, as well as presentations from other university administrators about course registration changes. And those changes were released to the university this past week. He also had a meeting with Chief James the past week about the ways in which to support UNC Police as they continue building a safer campus in light of the current events. They also spoke about Chiefs Advisory Committee, which Speaker Gary and Vice President Rebecca are dutifully working on. Moving now to this week, Thursday is University Day. All students will have class all for the first portion of the day. President Everett will be attending the University Day ceremony at Memorial Hall and will be moderating a panel with 3 Carolina alumni during the ceremony. Please feel free to join President Everett at this event, and the first 100 students to do so and to stay for the entire ceremony will receive a free voucher. The ceremony will begin at 11 a.m. on this Thursday, October 12th, and it will last about an hour and a half. Some distinguished guests at this event include Jenny Han, who wrote the infamous series To All the Boys I've Loved Before, and Elizabeth Beiser, the Secretary of North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. So if you can, please come out and celebrate our university. Student and tuition fee committees are also beginning to meet, and President Everett is looking forward to working with other stakeholders and the university chief financial officer to do this important work. That's all for updates, and I'm happy to ask any questions that anyone has.
We will now move to our report from the USG Vice President.
Hey y'all, good to see you again. Henry, can I put this here? Thank you. Okay, so last time President Everett and I spoke up here, we both mentioned Eve Carson, the Every Moment Counts week. Those efforts are ongoing, but that week will be postponed probably until next year. It's just a heavy logistical lift, so wanted y'all to be aware of that. There will be a speakership series, so when we have more information, we will definitely share that with you. I met with a really wonderful team and Dr. Megan Plench to discuss triple I policy. I think I talked about this last time I was in front of you guys. For those of you who have taken a triple I course, some of the most exciting proposals that I heard is requiring every professor who teaches a triple I course to be in every class session that their class has. So not just being there 30% of the time, being there 100% of the time. Encouraging professors to teach in blocks of classes rather than 1, 2, and 3, just alternating all the time. That's also really exciting. And generally, Dr. Plenge is working really hard to make those changes and make those classes not a mess, which is my understanding is what they are right now. Thank you, Senator Forbes and Speaker Gary, for coming and chatting with some folks in cabinet about viewpoint neutrality and some changes in the code. Really appreciated y'all putting in the time, showing up and talking to us over an exec. The Dean of Arts and Sciences Advisory Committee met on October 2nd and will be meeting again, I want to say October 28th. And our student body president for the night mentioned some of those really exciting waitlist changes. Just want to hit a few of those for you guys. So students can now waitlist up to 12 credits on top of 18 credits. That's 30 credits total that you can be waitlisted and enrolled in combination. In the summer, that's going to be a limit of 8 credit hours on the waitlist. And then the waitlists are going to open in wave 2 of registration for undergraduates. They're going to be waitlists for most courses. There are a few notable exceptions, specifically for internships and research experiences. And there are now unlimited seats on Connect Carolina waitlist. So I'm pumped about that. So you can be like 800th in line for a class, at which point you should get off the waitlist. And you can now join a waitlist up until the night before, the day before the course add deadline, which is going to be about 4 days into the semester. And then the last thing is the Student Advisory Council to the Chancellor met this morning. Those folks will be coming in front of you all shortly, specifically Rules and Judiciary, so those folks can be appointed in a formal capacity. But some of the things that we spoke about today are University Day. You should go get your free voucher, have your free food. Also, they do a fun walk from, is it South Road? What road do they walk from? Where the old well is, right? Yeah, they all wear their nice robes and their hats and they do a walk. So I'm going to try and go. You guys should go and you shouldn't have classes. And then I'm sure many of you have been aware of the ongoing situation in Israel-Palestine. The Vice Chancellor today shared that there are 2 confirmed students who are studying abroad that the university has made contact with, and they're fine per her reports to us. So just wanted to share that in this space, that the university is aware of registered UNC students in the region who have been in contact with the university. And then the last thing, so in 2020 or 2021, UNC, the system went test optional. That decision will expire at the end of next year. And so there are ongoing conversations with the Board of Governors about what that's going to look like, and also about how the university generally is continuing with its admissions processes. And then the real last thing, I've had a few folks reach out to me about outstanding external appointments. I want to highlight a few. If any of these sound interesting to you, please let me know after this meeting. We have spots on Campus Rec on the advisory board to Campus Recreation. We have 4 vacancies on the Student Library Advisory Board, and that's a really active board. It's hard to find people to fill that traditionally. The STV Board of Directors, I think the code might just be outdated on that one. And so I think that there's some stuff that we have to do there. And then WXYC Board of Directors. There are some other things in the code that are currently vacant, but they are not active. And so I'm working with somebody from Speaker Gary's office to go through the code, to audit that, and to make sure that all of those positions are active and are actually meeting. So should have something for you guys in the next few months, weeks. Happy to take any questions. Okay, awesome. Thank you.
The USG treasurer was not able to attend tonight's meeting, but did send the following written updates. SFAC met today and reviewed a fee adjustment request from the Carolina Union. They requested an 8% increase to their operating fee, equivalent to about $12 per student. SFAC felt that their request was justified by the needs of the union, but given system regulation, voted only to recommend an increase to their fee consistent with the new expense for legislative salary increases. TFAT will meet for the first time tomorrow at 3:30, and SFAS will meet next week, and TFAT again the week after. We expect to consider significant school-based tuition adjustment requests in TFAT. Any questions can be directed to the treasurer by email at usgtreasurer@unc.edu. Our next report is from the USG Chief of Staff. I don't see the USG Chief of Staff here. Did they send up? No. Okay, the USG Director of State and External Affairs informed me they cannot attend tonight's meeting, which brings us to our report from the Student Attorney General. Should move the slides forward, and if you hold this, it's a
All right. So I know that everybody doesn't want a super long presentation tonight, so I'll try to make this relatively quick. I was talking to Andrew, and I think it may be beneficial for me to go through what exactly my system does for both the benefit of you guys, and also hopefully it'll be somewhat interesting to know what exactly we do. So, all right, so first of all, who are we? So the honor system is one entity that is a subsection of the judicial branch, but there are three sections within that. So there is the Attorney General's staff, which is the staff that I represent. There is the honor court, which Lawazi Bululu, who is not here tonight, represents. And then there's the outreach branch, who is led by Elizabeth Gilchrist. So we all do separate things. I'll kind of walk through briefly what exactly it is we all do. We all kind of work together to make the honor system run as a whole, but we all have very separate and very different roles within that. So general positions within my staff, there is somewhat of a hierarchy. I think we generally like to think of it as not so much of a hierarchy, but a horizontal distribution of positions, though in many cases it does become somewhat hierarchical in terms of overview of the case. So Attorney General, that's my position. I'll go through what each of these positions means. Deputy Attorney General, I have 3 deputies at this time. Case managers and counsels are the last position. For honor court, we have 3 primary positions. Again, we have a couple sub positions within these, but the 3 primary positions are the chair of the honor court, the vice chairs, and the court members. So I'm just going to walk you through briefly like what a case actually looks like from start to finish. Initially, when something happens, so somebody does something on campus that the university is not happy with, or any random person is not happy with. So when that happens, someone submits a report to the Office of Student Conduct. That can be a professor. Commonly, people usually think of us as dealing with plagiarism. So professor is a big one of the reporting parties that we work with, but we also deal with police officers, other students submit reports, parents submit reports, we get reports transferred from other offices. The Office of Student Conduct occasionally conducts initial investigations, although for the most part, that is my job. The Office of Student Conduct will generally do an initial investigation in the cases of like large scale cases with, such as like fraternities or other organizations where there are a huge number of people to interview and a lot of faces to meet. But following that, it proceeds to my staff. So at this point, the Office of Student Conduct has determined that this is a case that meets the purview of my staff. Namely, it does not involve sexual assault. It does not involve underage drinking. or some other kind of like Title IX violation. Virtually everything else does fall within our purview and gets referred to us. So the report comes to me, and then I decide whether I or my deputies will then meet with the involved parties to ultimately make a charge decision. So the charge decision is basically whether or not the case should proceed to a hearing. That is ultimately my decision and no one else's, and I make that decision based off of two factors. The first one is reasonable basis, whether or not I believe that there is a reasonable basis that some kind of violation of the honor code has occurred. The second is university interest, which is a very loosely defined term, but essentially, what does university care about? What does university care about addressing in terms of some kind of disciplinary infraction? So again, that is ultimately my decision. My deputies meet with the parties and kind of like draft up what they believe should be the decision, and then I review that, or I meet with the parties and make the decision unilaterally. With the I communicate with my deputies when making the decisions. So, but yeah, so the charge decision is essentially about a 2-ish page document. I think the most I've done is about a 6-page document for a charge decision. We put out roughly 3 charge decisions every week, but it varies widely. I think this week it'll probably be around 4 or 5. But I mean, we've done upwards of 10 in a week. Moving on from the charge decisions, should a student be charged with some kind of violation of the honor code, I then assign the case to one of my case managers. So the case manager will then meet with the student and meet with any other involved parties necessary, basically explain the entire process to the student to the extent that I have not done already. At that point, they then attempt to schedule the hearing. Scheduling hearings are notoriously impossible and honestly by far the worst part of the job. But then once they work on finding a preliminary date for a schedule, they then assign counsels to represent the different sides in the case. So moving on to the counsels. So counsels will then be assigned to either, as we refer to, investigate the case or to defend the accused student. So that involves meeting with their respective parties, meeting with witnesses, meeting with anybody else involved in the case, and assembling narratives and assembling a statement about the case. So ultimately, their goal is to present a statement, which typically it will be around 3 to 4 pages per case. That varies somewhat. I think my current record under my administration is about a 20-page statement for a single case. My personal record was only about 12, I would say. And then from that point, they will proceed to the actual hearing. So hearings take many forms, but essentially it's over Zoom. And in the hearing, all sides get heard out, and the counsels will make verbal arguments on behalf of whatever side they're representing. So moving on to the honor court. So the honor court is a separate branch. I have no influence over the honor court. Again, that is Lawazi, the chair of the honor court, who presides over that branch. So essentially, the honor court's job is to sit in on the hearings. If you like to liken it to the criminal justice system, we usually don't like to do that because there are a lot of issues with doing that. It is a very separate system. But in a somewhat analogous way, the court are like the jury. They decide, first of all, whether or not the student should be held responsible for the case at all. And then furthermore, if the student is to be held responsible, they decide how exactly the university should respond which specifically is sanctioning in this case. So sanctioning, we have a huge amount of sanctions that we are allowed to offer. Some of them are more applicable to some cases than others. Some of them are not applicable to certain cases. But essentially, it ranges anywhere from a written letter of warning all the way to expulsion. And so virtually anything in between as well. We can also offer sanctions like restitution, community service, behavioral programs, other such things. But at its core, it's meant to be an educational process, though occasionally there are sanctions that do tend to be somewhat more punitive. So following the hearing, I'll just go through this really quickly because it's somewhat less important to the overall gist of what exactly we do. But so following the hearing, the student will then meet with a representative from the Office of Student Conduct and go over what happened in the case, how does that affect the student, what are the next steps moving forward. And it is at this time that the student is allowed to bring up appeals if they have any desire to proceed with an appeal. So I'll just proceed with the appeals real quick. Again, this is slightly less important. The vast majority of cases do not go to appeals, but I would say 5, maybe 10% proceed with an appeal. So it's not an exceptional number, but it's also not negligible. We also have several appeals coming up in the near future. But so essentially for an appeal, they can appeal on 3 grounds: insufficiency of evidence, severity of sanctions, and violation of basic rights. I won't go into detail too much on what each of these are, but if any of you are curious, feel free to ask me questions or, contact me after I give this speech. And then in the what we call a UHB, a University Hearings Board, this is the only part of the process where the majority of participants are not students. 3 of the 5 honor court members are administrative, whereas the entire process before that was entirely students. And then, so in this UHB, the panel is allowed to either uphold the previous decision from the court or overturn it if they see fit. Yeah, so it's just a little bit more information. My staff does still provide counsels for that, different counsels than the original hearing for the most part, and the court does provide 2 members of that. So somewhat similar process, but also a little bit different as well. Following that, there is a final right to appeal, which is called a chancellor's review, where the student and usually me will meet with several members of the chancellor's office, typically Vice Chancellor Amy Johnson, and a few other representatives from the chancellor's office. And in that meeting, it's again a discussion of what has happened previously, and ultimately the chancellor's office has the final decision on whether or not to uphold the previous decisions. So yeah, then the case is closed. When all appeal options are finalized, and when the sanctions are completed, which can be a varying amount of time. Sometimes sanctions are given indefinitely and the student is required to appeal that sanction to have it lifted from their status. But for the most part, they're typically definite. And yeah, just a brief overview of some of the case types, because there are so many different case types that we are allowed to offer. So not guilty hearing types are the biggest pain in my ass personally, but they are crucial for the students, of course. So we have a lot of not guilty hearings, and of course this is a huge benefit to the university in that if a student is accused of something that they didn't actually do, they are allowed to plead not guilty to that. And representatives of my staff then advocate on behalf of them that they should not receive any response from the university. They are certainly the most difficult ones to schedule and deal with from an administrative point of view. I believe we have approximately 15 to 20 currently pending. The other processes are all subsections where the student is pleading responsible. Yeah, they have different nuances within that. And then so I just wanted to give you guys somewhat of a brief overview of what exactly it is that I do and what exactly it is that my other branch leaders do as well. So the outreach coordinator, that's Elizabeth, more generally deals with not so much the cases, but outreach to the university community, to educate the faculty, to educate the campus body about how exactly the process works, how exactly to best uphold the values of the honor system. Luwazi, I've already talked about a little bit. As the chair of the honor court, he is required to sit in on one of the hearing types, one of the somewhat more common hearing types. And in those cases, presides over the case. We are also required to have a chair in every single hearing type. So whether that be Luwazi or one of his vice chairs, there is a chair in every single hearing type. Luwazi also presides over all of the court members and making sure that all of them are on task and well informed, as well as leading trainings and various other things. I obviously can't speak as well as to their positions as I can to mine. My job, as I've already talked about, somewhat consists of making those charge decisions where I decide whether or not cases should proceed to a hearing. But additionally, my job is to have a general overview of all of the cases happening at the time and the general procession of those cases to a hearing. I generally say that Luwazi's job is mostly dealing with overseeing all of the cases that happen once they reach the actual hearing, whereas my job is assuring that all of those cases actually proceed to a hearing, and making sure that all of the parties present in those hearings are well prepared. But yeah, I think that's about it. I'll just give you my standard numbers. I believe we have about 15 cases awaiting charges. We have about 35 to 40 cases pending hearings right now. So, all right, that's it for me. I welcome any questions you guys may have.
Thank you for that report and for giving us that information. I really appreciate it. All right, let's see. The student government advisor is not present. We will now move to the receipt of petitions and messages. There are no papers addressed to the Senate, no requests for 3-minute speeches. We are now in line for public comment period. Is there anyone who wishes to give public comment at this time? Seeing no requests for public comment period, is there a motion to enter the committee of the whole?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and alter the agenda by adding USB 105, 105 and USR 105, 107 to the committee of the whole calendar.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Without objection, we will move into a public comment period on the question to add these two items to the agenda. Does anyone wish to offer public comment on whether these items should be added to the agenda? Seeing no request for public comment and hearing no objection, these items will be added to the agenda. At this time, is there a motion to enter the committee of the whole?
So moved.
Is there a second? Without objection, we'll now enter the committee of the whole. Is there anyone who wishes to preside over the committee of the whole? And if not, is there a motion to suspend the rules?
A motion to suspend the rules and allow RNJ chair to preside over committee of the whole.
Without objection.
Yes, okay. So when I was putting in the information for the subsequent cycle, I came to the realization that under the way the code is worded right now, honor system and the Board of Elections would not be eligible for this subsequent appropriations because in the code, it states that subsequent appropriations shall only be open to organizations which were not appropriated funding during the semi-annual budget process. And since the Board of Elections and Honor System received money in the form of stipends, this would make them ineligible. But since they didn't get a real budget and instead just that stipend budget, I thought it would be appropriate to add the line, except funds appropriated on the basis of any mandate, which would carve out an exception for stipends and would allow the Board of Elections and the honor system to still receive the $1,500 budget that they requested. If there are any questions, I'll answer those.
In that case, do I hear a motion? Without objection. Yep. Yep. That's the FN key. We will now move into consideration of USB 105-105, a bill to reduce the number of positions subject to the advice and consent of the undergraduate Senate. The bill is introduced by Speaker Gary. Speaker Gary is now recognized.
There it goes. Thank you. This bill is the product of discussions that I had with the president over the weekend regarding the position of USG executive manager. For those who aren't aware, the previous executive manager, Everson Moran, resigned a couple weeks back. And the president has sent me a nomination to replace Everson. And we had a conversation about the fact that would require convening a selection committee and going through a minimum of 10-day application window and a bunch of other steps to fill this role. And the president and I, after discussing his options and like potential other remedies, decided that it is better to remove this position from Section 210 because there are no code mandated duties assigned to this position. And it's a lot of hassle for the Senate to go through confirming this and a lot of hassle to put any applicant through for a 10-day application period, review by selection committee, review by the R&J committee, review by the whole Senate, and then they can do their jobs, especially for a position. In my opinion, is meant to support just the president and not really like do a lot beyond that. And I don't think it's appropriate for the Senate to have that much control in like the president's personal staff. So yeah, that's why this bill is happening. That's why it's being added late to the agenda, and I will yield to any questions.
Are there any questions for the speaker? Seeing no questions, are there any points, motions, or discussion on the floor at this time? Without objection. We will now move into the consideration of USR 105-107, a resolution providing for a joint session of the undergraduate and graduate professional senates to receive a message from the Chancellor of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. This resolution having been introduced by Speaker Gary, you're recognized.
Thank you. So as the title of this resolution suggests, it is the time of year for the State of the University Address. This is the annual speech by the Chancellor to the undergraduate Senate that goes back many, many decades of tradition. However, this year, after discussions with my counterpart in the graduate student government, we decided we would like to hold a joint session inviting the graduate Senate and undergraduate Senates to both hear from the Chancellor at the same time and have the opportunity to ask questions of him on matters affecting the university. Prior to the student government splitting in 2017, there was no need for a joint session. He would just come to Student Congress, which had both graduate and undergraduate members. We obviously don't have that anymore. Basically, we have our regular meeting on November 7th. He will come to this meeting on November 7th. He will give a speech. We'll ask him some questions, and then we will proceed with our normal business if we have any. I think that's all. Like, I'll take any questions.
Are there any questions for the speaker at this time? Seeing none, do I hear a motion? Without objection. We are now out of committee of the whole.
Thank you, Chair McClanahan. At this time, we are now in line for the consent calendar. Is there a motion with regards to the consent calendar?
Motion to adopt.
Without objection, the consent calendar is adopted. We are now in line for general orders. There is one general order, USD 105078, confirmation of Nicole Corsi as a member of the Campus Recreation Advisory Council for the 2023-2024 academic year. The chair of the Rules and Judiciary Committee is recognized for the committee's report.
The nominee was not present and as such was reported without prejudice.
Does the vice president wish to give any remarks? Did you say you're withdrawing that?
Yeah, like not in she's just not gonna be anymore, but you will get a formal.
Okay,
Yeah, in the future, because I know this is pushed from last time we said meeting, but you will get a formal. That nomination.
okay, I see.
Not in a bad way, she's awesome, he's awesome.
Okay, I see. At this time, is there a motion to postpone indefinitely?
So moved.
Without objection, the item is postponed indefinitely. At this time, are there any further items of business? Chair is recognized. Okay. If there are no other items of business, I have a couple of announcements. First, the State of the University is scheduled for November 7th at 7:30 p.m. That is our regularly scheduled meeting time. The graduates will be joining us. The chancellor is coming to this meeting. Like, we do got to dress up a little bit more, not like a suit and tie, but like basically no gym shorts and t-shirts. That's kind of the historical standard. I think that's the only announcement that I can remember at the moment. R&J chair is recognized.
The R&J committee will be meeting next Tuesday. If you're on R&J, be there.
Are there any other announcements at this time? Chair Baruch.
Just a reminder, if you are going to miss a meeting, please remember to email me or fill out the attendance form. The speaker's been getting some of these emails and he does inform me typically, but that technically doesn't count as properly reporting it. So, fill out the form, email me, either one works. Yeah, thanks.
Are there any other notices or announcements at this time? Chair Forbes.
The Finance Committee will be meeting this Thursday and next Tuesday at 6:45 p.m. so we can hold our last 2 hearing nights of the semester and be done. So make sure if you're on the Finance Committee to go to those.
Are there any other notices or announcements at this time? If there are none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Without objection, we stand adjourned at 8:33 p.m.